को राज्यसभा, जहां पर संविधान का पर विशेष चर्चा शुरू हो गई है। वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण क्या कुछ कह रही हैं, सुनिए।
India expert Dr. Subhash Kashyap had to say, while many constitutions of nations framed after the Second World War have floundered and gone into oblivion, our constitution successfully faced many crises and survived. This itself is evidence of its resilience, dynamism, and growth potential. Now, India's experience has shown that our constitution remains robust, yielding to several amendments, as I said, which were the need of the hour. And Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chairman of the drafting committee, had said, and I quote, "I feel, however good a constitution may be, it is sure to turn out bad because those who are called to work it happen to be a bad lot. However bad a constitution may be, it may turn out to be good if those who are called to work it happen to be a good lot." Unquote. These are words of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, sir. And in this background, therefore, with those words right afresh in our mind, I'd like to discuss about how in the last 7 decades, the living document that our Constitution is, has faced very many amendments. And while looking at those amendments, I'd like to have a touchstone of 4 different elements. One, has the social intent behind any amendment been genuine? And therefore the outcome has been genuine? That's one test I would like to place any amendment on the testing board. Second, I'd like to see if the economic intent and the economic outcome of any constitutional amendment has actually been bona fide and has the outcome helped the society at large. Third, I'd like to test it on the ground of process adopted for it, for the amendment itself. And fourth, the constitutional spirit behind such an amendment. Now, if an amendment can go through these kind of tests, we'll be able to see why India's constitution, going by the words of Dr. Ambedkar, if you had good people who are called to work on it, give good outcomes. If you have, I'm using Ambedkar's words, bad people who are brought to work on it happen to give such outcomes which are discussed. So if I move to talking about those amendments which have gone through these 4 tests, we'll be able to see how the intent and the outcome are justifiable, and people in the history books do write about them. Sequentially, because it is the first ever amendment, I'd like to take about the first Constitutional Amendment Act of 1951. So it's been said, and Honorable Prime Minister, while talking in the Lok Sabha, also referred to the fact that there was an interim government in place between 1947, August 15th. The interim government was there before that as well. And it lasted till 17th April 1952, post which an elected government took over the charge. But during 1951, when the amendment for the first Constitutional Amendment Act was passed, it was an interim government and not elected Government of India post 1947. Now, this was enacted, therefore, within a year of the commencement of the Constitution. It's worth remembering. In fact, on the issues related to the amendment, or which triggered the amendment itself, which is the freedom of speech and expression, the amendment added 3 more heads to Article 19(2), saying public order could be a cause to restrict freedom of speech, friendly relations with foreign states could be a cause to restrict freedom of speech, or incitement to an offence could also be a cause. These were the amendments brought in the first constitutional amendment. Sir, the Supreme Court of India, even in 1950, 1 year before this amendment, had passed two landmark judgments that paved the way for freedom of press under Article 19(1)(a). The Supreme Court had ruled in favor of the communist magazine Crossroads, and the RSS's organizational magazine Organizer. The Supreme Court had ruled in favor of them in 1950. Many high courts also upheld the freedom of expression of our citizens and ruled in their favor. But in response, the interim government thought that there was a need for a first constitutional amendment, and that was brought in by the INC, and it was essentially to curb the freedom. So India, a democratic country, which prides itself even today about freedom of expression, saw the first interim government coming up with a constitutional amendment which was to curb the freedom of speech of Indians. And that is within 1 year of adoption of the Constitution. So, let me say, sir, that is because the first Prime Minister of this country deplored press scrutiny of his government, even as he publicly praised freedom of the press. There was no doubt about it. And he had scrutinized the amending bill himself before approving its introduction in the Parliament. In the Parliament, sir, it didn't go through smoothly at all. The voices which spoke about it, and I will also refer some of the observations made by eminent members, vehemently who opposed it. Sri Shyama Prasad Mukherjee said, "You can pass a law," I'm quoting, sir, "you can pass a law and say that the entire task of framing, interpreting, and working the Constitution will be left in the hands of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, assisted by such people whom he may desire to consult." I would think it was a snide remark, saying, "Oh, you do it all yourself with the people who you choose to have, and not with the approval of the Parliament." That was the extent to which Pandit Shyama Prasad Mukherjee was upset about this amendment. Sir, he also said, "You're treating this Constitution as a scrap of paper. You have declared preamble of your Constitution that you have done something unheard of in history, that within so short a period of attainment of freedom, you have trusted the people of this country to draft a Constitution. You have given a charter of rights to them. Now," Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee says, "now you come forward and stab them in the back. You're not working for the benefit of the present generation, but for party ends." But for party ends, unquote. Sir Sri Kameshwar Singh, a member of the Constituent Assembly, also had a lot of comments to pass, and he said, I quote, "This Parliament, again, is a provisional one, and it cannot be said to be reflecting the will of the people in the way the Constitution wants Parliament to reflect it. For a government or a Parliament of this kind, it is highly improper to make such fundamental changes in the Constitution without making any reference to public opinion, and that too at the fag end of the strenuous parliamentary session and almost on the eve of a general election," unquote. So scathing remarks were made, and despite these remarks, Prime Minister Nehru went ahead with the amendment. Kameshwar Singh again goes about to say, "Do they not show," I quote, "do they not show utter disregard for the Constitution when they attempt to amend it simply because some of the laws have been criticized and found invalid by the judiciary?" Today we hear comments from the Indian National Congress about how the current government is questioning the judiciary. This comment coming from a member of the Constituent Assembly itself says, prior to the First Amendment to the Constitution, which curtailed freedom of expression. The Prime Minister, he furthers, the Prime Minister, I'm constrained to say, that is Sri Kameshwar Singh, the Prime Minister, I'm constrained to say, is creating a bad precedent by sowing the seed of executive despotism, and playing with the supremacy of the Constitution for party advantages, unquote. So there was no doubt this amendment was more raised for the sake of the party or the Prime Minister and the government's image, rather than assuring what the Constituent Assembly had suggested as the Constitution which was going to be adopted. An amendment bill was passed, the Press Objectionable Matter Act, on 23rd October 1951. We know, therefore, the amendment, the intent, the four tests that I was talking about: social impact and intent, economic impact and intent, the constitutional spirit, and the process adopted for the amendment, all of which are questionable, but nevertheless that amendment was undertaken, and we heard how that amendment till today affects the freedom of speech of this country. Now, it is not as if this 1951 amendment happened all in a sudden. Prior to the amendment and post the amendment, we've had recorded action taken by those government that day, that particular government, in curtailing the freedom of speech. So the act was just waiting to happen, because even before it they started it, and even after that they were continuing. What are the examples, sir? Majroor Sultanpuri and Balraj Sahani were both jailed in 1949 itself. For what mistakes, sir? During one of the meetings.
तो राज्यसभा में संविधान पर विशेष चर्चा जारी है। वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण संविधान पर चर्चा कर रही हैं